Thank you for joining our Women's History Month conversation today featuring Summit County's own Judge Linda Teodosio. Today's webinar will be recorded and made available on BMD's website. Please feel free to ask questions anytime using the chat feature. Just pop your questions into the chat box and I will help field the questions as we go. My partner Bob Hager will be sort of facilitating that portion of the conversation. Today's presentation is the second in BMD's 2023 Diversity Speaker Series, celebrating and honoring the accomplishments of diverse leaders in the field of law. So before we hopped on, Bob and I were sharing with Judge Teodosio that our first speaker series honoring Black History Month was a presentation by conversation with Judge Solomon Oliver, which was outstanding. The speaker series was a brainchild of BMD's Empowerment and Opportunity Committee, which is BMD's initiative focused on promoting the unique and entrepreneurial spirit of our team with a common goal of driving equitable opportunity for clients, business partners, and the community. At BMD, we strive to be inclusive and to embrace the diversity and distinctiveness of our team members and our clients, and we aim to foster a sense of belonging and respect so that each person is empowered to work, act, and be their authentic self. I'm also going to make a plug for our Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month speaker series, which is May, Pride Speaker in June, and Hispanic Heritage Month in September. And without further ado, I'm going to move right into the portion of the presentation everyone's been waiting for. Please join me in welcoming Judge Linda Teodosio. When Cassandra asked for suggestions for Women's History Month speakers, I suggested Judge Teodosio, though I don't live in the Akron area and I'm certainly not a trial lawyer, and I'd actually not ever met Judge Teodosio, but I'd heard such wonderful things about her from my colleagues at BMD. And I will say, moreover, I've heard superlatives about the judge from court staff as well, including the sister of a dear friend who led the CASA program and provided case management for youth in the judge's court. I want to thank my partner, Don Davis, who I'm not sure if Don is on, for helping me land Judge Teodosio as our featured guest today. Don diligently pursued the judge's bailiff until she relented. I encourage you to read Judge Teodosio's impressive full biography and list of awards. Sarah, if you don't mind maybe putting the link to the judge's biography in the chat, that would be wonderful. Judge Teodosio has held the Summit County Juvenile Court bench for more than 20 years. During that time, she has impacted the lives of thousands of Summit County children and families by developing innovative strategies for juvenile disposition and rehabilitation. And some of those include, I'll just give you some of the highlights: Restore Court, which is a program that addresses youth who become court involved but have been identified as victims of human trafficking. The Crossroads program, specialized docket designed for youth with co-occurring mental illness and/or substance use disorder. The Family Resource Center, which provides case management that links youth and families to support services in the community. And the New Paths Probation for Youth and with Developmental Disabilities. It's my belief that every child and young person deserves a chance to succeed, and Judge Teodosio's work makes that possible. I look forward to hearing about the judge's experience as a woman in the field of law. And I think the best way to do that probably is just to facilitate a discussion. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to my partner, Bob Hager, who will facilitate a conversation and Q&A with the judge. Please honestly feel free to put questions in the chat. We want to hear from you. We want this to be an interactive discussion. And if you don't do that, Bob, you'll be stuck asking all the questions, which will be great too. I'm really excited to hear what we have to learn from Judge Teodosio.
Thank you, Daphne. And thank you also, Daphne, for your leadership at our firm on our DE&I committee, our Empowerment and Opportunity Committee, and to Cassandra Manna for taking over as chair of that committee. You guys have done a phenomenal job over the last 2 years, 3 years, and we've accomplished a lot. I'd also like to thank our partner, Marlon Primes, who facilitated the last discussion with Judge Oliver, and he's done amazing things on that committee as well. Very proud of our firm and our ability to move the ball forward. And so today I really look forward this afternoon to help, Judge Teodosio's reputation precedes her. Daphne recommended her and had never even met her. So that speaks to her reputation. And you talked about being a judge and all the things she's accomplished. My goal for today is to let you get to know Linda, to get to know who Linda is as a woman, as a person, as a mother, as a grandmother, We'll talk about all the legal stuff and the law and the professions, but as much as those accomplishments are impressive, you really want to get to know the person to know what drives her and what motivates her, where she gets her energy and how she does it. Because Linda's been very inspirational to many of us in Summit County and Ohio, who have dealt with her. And I've seen her personally mentor young women and inspire them in the law, including my daughter. So thank you. Judge, let's start off with a few questions. I know there's a few things you'd like to share, but the National Women's History Alliance has defined the theme of Women's History Month as celebrating women who tell our stories. So we'll start off with a softball question for you. If you could tell us a little bit about your story. How did you develop as a young lawyer and as a young judge, and what was your career path?
Well, if it's okay, I'd like to go back even a little bit further than that, if it's all right. And I'm not going to give you the blow by blow of my my life history, but I think it's important to recognize where people come from and how that can direct their career path. My dad was a high school football star that got a scholarship to play football at the University of Cincinnati. That was interrupted when he went to war when the Korean conflict started up. My mom was a secretary and then was a stay-at-home mom, and neither of them graduated from college. I think I had one uncle that graduated from college, but other than that, there were no other even college graduates in my family. So, wanting to be part of the law, always having wanted to be a lawyer, I really didn't have anyone to look to in my family who had chosen that career path. To be honest with you, my Italian grandmother who came to this country would have been perfectly satisfied if I would have gotten married and started having babies at 16, because that's what they did in the old country. But in any event, I do need to say one thing that was very prevalent in my upbringing, despite the fact that my mother never went to college, did not pursue a career. I was surprised to learn that there was something called gender discrimination, because my whole life I was fed the message from my family that I could be and do whatever it was that I put my mind to, that I was smart enough, that I was good enough, and that there were no barriers that I couldn't overcome. And so I think having that encouragement from a very young age, really helped develop my mindset that, it was up to me to make the most of any opportunity that came my way. I became interested in the law at a very young age, and to pinpoint exactly when that is, I really can't do. I know one of my best friends had a father who was going through law school at Akron Law, and she would also often tell me about his classes. And I thought, yeah, I think I want to do that someday. So I decided that that was the path for me. I had a high school counselor who encouraged me to think about backup careers in the event I changed my mind. And so I went to college and majored in elementary education, because she told me that you don't have to have a degree in something in particular to go to law school. Choose something else that you love. At the time, I guess I couldn't have foreseen that it would lead me to a juvenile court, where I've been able to use those skills I learned as an education major many times over in dealing with children and families and helping them navigate the things that they need to do to be successful. So I guess, it was kind of a path that was, in some ways very, very lucky, very coincidental, but I think every step I've taken along the way has really, really helped me. I started off as a lawyer in a litigation practice, which I very much enjoyed, but I was looking for something different around the time my children were born, maybe something that would give me more flexibility, if you will, to spend time with my family. And someone suggested that I look at applying to be a referee at the Akron Municipal Court. And I did that and found that I equally enjoyed being on the other side of the bench. When you make the decision to run for judge, however, it brings up a whole bunch of other challenges, one of which is that you have to be elected. And, campaigning was a skill that I had to learn as well. It was something that was not familiar to me. And so I had to learn how to relate to people in a different way. And as much as I'm not shy about speaking in front of groups of people or presenting in the courtroom, campaigning was something that was very, very challenging for me. And it was something I had to practice and learn how to do. And I was fortunate enough to have a good coach and my father-in-law, who was very active in local politics, to help me guide me through that process. The first time I ran, I was not successful. I lost my first political race. And I think that sometimes folks lose sight of the fact that not being successful is a part of growing. And it would have been very easy to, hang up that ambition and not move forward with that after having lost a political race. But it's the amazing thing, I think, to remember is that if you see someone or someone that you think can accomplish something, is to continue to encourage them and not to give up if they aren't successful the first time. And the day after I lost the election, my voicemail was full of people saying, you need to do this again. You can become a judge one day. And I held them to the responsibility of helping me with that process. And I was very fortunate to be elected in the Cuyahoga Falls Municipal Court, where I served for 5 years. It was a very easy decision for me to throw my hat in the ring to become the juvenile court judge, because as I stated, I always love working with young people. And to this day, the highlight of my job is not only the love of the law, but also the ability to connect with young people and hopefully be a positive influence in their lives. And it's something I take very seriously. A good friend of mine constantly reminds me that as I'm in my 21st year on the bench, every child that comes before me every day, I've been the judge their whole life. And what that points out to me is the importance of the responsibility of the seat that I hold and the duty that I really have to make lives better for others. And fortunately, if I have one talent, Bob, I would say it's the ability to assemble a team that is much smarter than I am. And I think the same goes true with the law firm. You assemble people that have all of their different gifts, and together you work as a team to do your best for your clients. And we try to do the same thing here at the court for the families and the children that we serve. Each of us brings a special gift and an expertise, and I'm just thrilled with the team that I've been able to assemble, and that's what I'm the most proud of.
Well, thank you, Judge. Boy, a lot of information there to think about. And congratulations on 21 years on the bench.
That's
Real
crazy, huh?
real gift to Summit County. And really, tell me a little bit about connecting with young people today. As I get older, generational changes, there's just so much technology and so much that's impacting. What can you share with us in terms of how can we best relate to, support, and understand young people today?
Oh, if I had the answer to that question, right?
Yeah.
I think what I've learned over the years is to recognize that relating to young people really requires building up trust, building that relationship. Most young people are looking for relationships with adults, but they don't necessarily want to jump into them both feet first. And I am very deliberate when I meet a young person, particularly if that young person's background is different than mine. I recognize that a 15 or 16-year-old African-American male may not look at me as a 66-year-old grandmother and think that I understand the problems that they face in the world. So I really try to take some time in the hearings I have with youth to make sure that they understand that I care about their stories and their needs. And I want them to help me to understand what I need to do to help them. And I think that that consistency of asking that question and my efforts to make sure that I do the best I can to meet those needs while being honest with them when I can't has really been helpful to me. And I think, that part of it is providing them with people that they can trust and they can relate to, even if it's not me, so that they feel that they can communicate with the court. And I think that becomes, building those relationships are very important. We're all aware as lawyers, and certainly I learned it during my tenure with the State Bar Association, that, our profession is shrinking. There are fewer lawyers to serve the needs of the people in Ohio. I happen to believe that being a lawyer is the most noble of all professions. We help people when they are facing circumstances or crises or issues that they cannot handle on their own. And, you know, even if we look at those relationships with young people, to try to interest them in the practice of law, to help them understand how important the legal system is to the functioning of our society, that, you know, perhaps we can bring some of those youngsters along, college students along that might not otherwise consider our profession to do just that. And there have been young people even have come through the court system that I look at their ability to advocate for themselves and tell them, you know, you could be a lawyer one day. If you can advocate this well on your own behalf, just think of what you could do for someone else. So I think it's important to build that trust, to open up doors and to help them explore possibilities for themselves that maybe they hadn't envisioned on their own.
Yeah, thanks, Judge. That's a great response. Trust in any relationship is key. And I remember my mother told me, "You can be a lawyer someday," when I was a young boy, and that stuck with me. So I'm glad you're telling the young folks who appear before you, you can do it, and giving them, you know, that hope. The other thing that you were saying that really struck me was about the love of the law and a noble profession. And you know, we have the license to practice. We're privileged. We have an attorney-client relationship. It's a fiduciary relationship. You know, during your tenure as the OSBA president, can you speak a little bit about some of the challenges and goals that you had during that? And also, how does this idea of the law being a noble profession manifest itself?
Well, I was very privileged to be elected president of the Ohio State Bar Association. If you would have told me I would have been fortunate enough to hold that position when I was starting law school, I'd probably still be laughing. But, you know, fortunately, I was recommended to serve on the board and then was fortunate enough to be elected president. I can tell you the thing I looked forward to the most during my tenure was getting around to the different districts, meeting lawyers, having the ability to interact with them, because when I was running, I discovered how different the practice of law is depending upon the community that you're in, how different the focus might be. The other thing I was very privileged to learn about was the honoring of the 50-year members, and to see all the things that lawyers through the years have given of themselves, not because there's a fee involved, but because of their expertise to help serve their community by working with nonprofits, by working through doing pro bono work, all the amazing things that lawyers have done. I was set to begin my term in June of 2020, and then in March, the governor shut the state down, basically. Right. So all of those ideas I had of things that I hope to accomplish during my tenure were kind of put to the side. But I think that it was a privilege to be part of the association at a time that we were trying to help lawyers navigate how to do their job in a virtual world that none of us were prepared for. Of course, we all know the hard work that the Chief Justice did to make sure that the practice of law and the operation of the court system was seen as vital services during the time that many other professions were finding themselves on the back burner because of the health crisis. And I think because of the assistance of the Supreme Court, and hopefully some of the webinars that the Bar Association offered for free about techniques, tips for working with clients virtually, ideas about how to present their case on Zoom, which would be something unheard of before COVID, really help lawyers kind of navigate and know that they weren't alone in navigating that very difficult process. And I think that the silver lining to that COVID cloud has been that the association lawyers have all learned to operate in a way that doesn't necessarily always require that we be in the same room. We certainly know that we accomplish a lot when we're together physically, but certainly it has given us means to better serve our clients in our profession by allowing some of those things to continue to happen virtually. The other thing I hope to really accomplish during my tenure was helping lawyers focus on wellness a little bit. I think it's, you know, we deal every day with other people's problems, and that's even before we deal with our own. And it can be extremely stressful and overwhelming. And I always tell lawyers, do as I do, do as I say, not as I do. You know, so many of us work long hours taking our work home with us. And as much as we can be encouraged not to do that, it's something that's very easy to fall into. So I really hoped to develop some techniques for lawyers to use and helping them achieve their own wellness and some balance in life. And fortunately, that was something that kind of did go hand in hand with the COVID crisis. And we developed a Ohio State Bar Association wellness resource page for our members, where there are articles, ideas, different things that lawyers can do to help maintain that balance and achieve wellness. We did some virtual yoga sessions, some virtual cooking classes, and we've done some book clubs that allow lawyers to take some time to read some books that can help focus on wellness. And I'm going to put a plug in, if you don't mind, for a wellness panel that the Bar Association is going to be hosting for free for all members in April. And it's going to focus on the balance between mind, body, and spirit. Our own Larry Villeman from Akron is going to be part of that panel. And I think it's going to be great to kind of do some of those things. So that's been kind of the work that I've been able to spearhead and be part of through the Bar Association. And I hope it's something that's served the profession. And of course, I was president when George Floyd was murdered, and we really tried to step up our diversity, equity, and inclusion work by partnering with other bar associations that represent minority groups to be better in touch with them. And I really salute your firm for tackling that head on and making it available to your membership of your firm.
Thank you, Judge. And maybe, Sarah, we could find that wellness resource page from the OSBA and share that with our attorneys and other members of the profession. I think that's so important. And thank you for bringing that to our attention. And also, it would be nice if we could put on our firm's website the April Mind, Body, and Spirit Wellness Program that the Bar Association. We know Larry Villeman well from Heart to Heart and the breakfast and the word of the day. And Larry's been a good friend and a good mentor. So I really appreciate him very much. So that sounds like a fantastic program, and thanks for plugging it and letting us know about it. That brings up another question. You talk about the profession and wellness and helping each other. One way that lawyers really help each other is through mentorship. You know, you have supervising attorneys who may be, your boss who you report to and, sort of help you in terms of the day-to-day and maybe training and things like that. But a mentor is kind of a special relationship. Have you benefited from mentors over the course of your career? Can you share any mentor relationships you've had with us?
Well, I have been very, very fortunate to have many mentors. I mentioned the effect my mother had on me, but I had many professional mentors as well. One of whom was J.D. Caro, who was a professor of mine at the law school, who I had the ability to work with and get to know over the years, and he continues to be a huge support to me when I have questions or concerns. But when I worked at the legal clinic, he had me as an intern represent a woman in a divorce case. And this woman, was divorcing her husband, who was sentenced to life for a murder in prison. So there wasn't a huge likelihood that her husband was going to show up for court and contest the divorce hearing. But all the same, I had all my questions ready to go. I was prepared. I prepared my client ahead of time. And when I got to the courthouse, our hearing was before Judge Mary Cassiopo, who at that time was a referee magistrate in the domestic relations court. I put on my case, and Judge Cassiopo granted the divorce. And when that ended, she excused everybody from the courtroom, but she looked at me and she said, "But you, young woman, I want you to stay." And I thought, oh my gosh, my first hearing, and I'm already through as a lawyer. But Judge Cassiopo said to me, she said, "Young woman, I want you to know that you will be a fine lawyer someday. And the reason that I know that is because I could tell you were prepared, and there is no substitution for preparation." And she said, "I want to stay in touch with you because I know that you will be a fine lawyer." She didn't know me from Adam. She knew my husband's family very well. But at that time, I was Linda Teodosio, second-year law student at the University of Akron School of Law, who she had never laid eyes on before. But she took the time from her busy schedule to pull me aside, to not only encourage me, but to recognize that how important preparation was, and to commend me for the fact that I was well prepared. Fast forward, that was in, probably 1980. Fast forward to 1998, she swore me in as judge the first time I was elected, and continued to encourage me every step of the way, give me advice when I needed it. And it was truly an honor to have her as a mentor. If I have time, Bob, I'd like to share a little bit of her story, because I think it's
Sure.
important with Women's History Month that we recognize that even someone of my age had it a lot easier coming into the profession than people that laid the path for us. Judge Mary told me that when she entered law school in the 1940s, she was the only woman in her law school class at Akron, that on the first day of school, the professor called her name and said, "Mary Cassiopo, please rise." And she stood up, and he says, "Why, you are a woman." And she says, "That I am." And he said to her, "Women have no place in the law. I will make it my mission to make sure that you fail." And anybody who knew Judge Cassiopo knows that she looked him straight in the eye and said, "And I, sir, will make it my mission to succeed." And she reported it to the dean, who offered to move her to a different class. And she said, "No, I'm going to prove it to this professor that I've got what it takes." And obviously the rest is history. For those of you in the firm that are younger and then perhaps don't know of her legacy, she went on to serve as one of the first prosecutors with the city of Akron. She went on to serve as one of the first women to serve as a magistrate or referee in domestic relations court in our county, and of course went on to serve with distinction in the 9th District Court of Appeals, and by assignment upon her retirement for that bench. So, you know, when I have a day that seems like it's tough, I think back to what she had to face to come through the profession, and how her hard work, her preparation, and her dedication to making sure that others understood the important place that women have in the law really went a long way to lay the path open for the rest of us as we came through. Without her and others like her that were willing to take the hard knocks coming through, I don't know that we would all be where we are today.
That's really a powerful story. It's shocking, you know, to hear that she would be made to stand up in front of a room full of men and treated that way. Do we have similar situations today? How have you seen it? How much progress have we made? Or what are some of the things that we should be sensitive to?
Well, you know, it's interesting, because I think that that is something that varies around our state and most likely around our nation. I think, and I'm speaking of Summit County because that's what I'm most familiar with. If you look at our common pleas bench, all divisions is all women. That obviously has certainly not been the case. I do have to share a funny story. When I was still at the Cuyahoga Falls Municipal Court, I put together a panel discussion for a bunch of students that had come to our courthouse to learn about the law. And I invited judges that I knew to participate in a panel. And I think I had Judge Bond, who was then in the Common Pleas Court, Judge Stormer, who was on Municipal Court. I had Judge Hunter, who was in Juvenile Court. And I had Judge Nicely, who at that time was on the Domestic Relations Court. And we were all talking about our jobs in the law and all of that. When I opened it up for questions, one little boy raised his hand and he asked me, "Judge Teodosio, if I work really, really hard and really study, do you think someday boys could be lawyers too?" And I just had to kind of chuckle and laugh, because, you know, obviously that's just the opposite of what most people have experienced through life. So have we come a long way? Yeah, I think we have. I was in a discussion yesterday where someone told me that as recently as 15 years ago, they were aware of an incident where a judge would not let a woman practice in his court without proof that she was in fact a lawyer. So there are still some throwbacks in some areas of the state and the country where, you know, that is seen as, you know, where there's maybe not that feeling of equality. But I think the quality of lawyers and judges that are women have really pointed out that we have a lot to contribute to the profession, and we certainly belong there. And you know, I can remember early on, you know, being mistaken for Attorney Teodosio's secretary. But you know, I think, you know, by being dignified, by being prepared, by being ready to go, you know, we can certainly help people to understand everything that we do have to contribute.
Bob?
Thanks. Yes, go right
Oh, I'm
ahead.
sorry to interrupt you, Bob. I just want to let the attendees know that if you have questions, you can put them, use the Q&A function as opposed to the chat function. And we do have a question. Would you like me to read it, Bob?
Yes, thank you. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay, Judge Teodosio, this question is from my partner, David Scott in the Columbus office. He says, thank you for your insights, Judge. In your experience in private practice and in public service, what are some of the best examples of how law firms can empower women? And what are some pitfalls you've repetitively seen which are to be avoided?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. I think that there are a couple of things that I've experienced that have really been empowering to me, and I can think back to a time when I was in private practice, which is maybe more relevant to the question that you've asked. I was never made to feel like questions that I asked were stupid, that I should know that already. I was always treated with respect when I did have a question. I was always made to feel that my view of the law, the proposition that I was putting forward, was to be respected, although debated with respect. And even as a young lawyer, I was encouraged to take on difficult cases and trusted to represent clients. I worked in private practice with the firm that was Nucas and Parentinitis. It's now Parentinitis and Nolan, from the time I graduated from law school in 1982 until about 1988. So I was a very, very new lawyer during that time. Yet I was trusted on 6 occasions to go down to the Supreme Court of Ohio and argue a case before the Supreme Court on very important legal topics. And that sense of trust in me and my abilities went a long way to build my confidence and to allow me to grow and blossom. So I think that it's important to mentor, but I think it's also important to recognize the skill sets that people have and to nurture those and to encourage those and to express confidence in that person, that they are able to do the work that's been assigned to them and do it confidently. And I can't remember if there was another part of the question that I didn't answer.
Let me look at the second part of the question.
As a judge, I'm used to asking the questions.
That's right.
I don't always remember.
In your defense, that was a compound question. The second part of the question is, what are some pitfalls you've repetitively seen which are to be avoided?
Yeah, I think some pitfalls, that I have seen, and some of them I think are self-imposed by women many times in the law. When I started out, I was always afraid to excuse myself from something because my son had a football game that he was expecting that I would be at 6 o'clock, that I was afraid to say, hey guys, I gotta take off, because I was afraid that that I would be viewed as less of a lawyer because I was making that family time a priority in my life. And I was very, very surprised when I was confident enough to say, I've got this family obligation at this time, to recognize that people accepted that and expected that and said, oh gosh, that's more important, we can pick this up tomorrow. So I think that the pitfall many times is upon, and in particular women, I think we feel the need to not be seen as someone that can't do the job because we have a family to tend to as well, if that makes any sense at all. And I think that sometimes that pitfall falls upon women who don't want to acknowledge the importance of that. And so I think that acknowledging, and this goes true for the young men that are raising families as well, helping them achieve that balance between what's important in life and what's important in work, I think in the end makes them a more productive lawyer in the long run. That's my opinion, but those are some of the things that I have seen that have been important to me and coming through was getting over my own inability to speak up for myself for fear that it would jeopardize my position in a firm.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Bob, no further questions right now, so back to you.
Thanks. Jump in anytime with new questions. I hope we get a lot. I want to encourage everyone to ask their questions. It's interesting on that last point, Judge, when you said both, that applies to both men and women who have families, because things have changed a lot in terms of generational change. You talked about, your mother being a homemaker, and, my mother was a homemaker, didn't go to college. Well, now it's a different dynamic for most families, and oftentimes husbands and wife both work. But I remember a lot of the judges whose names you've mentioned here earlier from early parts of our career. But I also remember, working in private practice as a young associate and feeling guilty, if I was walking in, too late, or if I was leaving too early and sneaking on the elevator because I had something to do. And I think, fortunately, we've seen COVID have a positive effect on this, that people are, and I know this is the way at our firm, they are not micromanaged and they are treated as professionals. There's accountability to get your job done, of course, but in terms of where you need to be, when you need to be there, managing your schedule and, commenting about where do you think you're going? It's only 4:30, that isn't as much of the part of private practice now as it used to be when we started out in private practice. So that's good.
Yeah, I agree. And, while I am not a huge, let me rephrase that. Why I am not the type of person that prefers to work from home because I like the interaction with the people here in the building. I certainly appreciate that given certain circumstances, that the ability that we all have to do so much work from home now due to the advances in technology makes a huge difference in folks' lives. It used to be that if I had a sick child at home and there was no one else to tend to them and I had to take a day away from the office, that was a lost day that I wasn't able to get things done. And now with the ability to work from home, there is still the ability to do some things by Zoom. During the course of COVID, I had a very mild case, but I had to isolate for 5 days, and I was able to do my hearings and not miss a beat because of technology. And I think that, again, that's the silver lining from COVID, is it does give folks the ability to be where they need to be and still get work done. And so, kudos to the profession for advancing in that way. And I think really recognizing the importance of that work-life balance and not micromanaging, recognizing that I can get online and do research or do work on paperwork, at 8 o'clock at night as easily as I can at 5:30 in the afternoon from my office. So that's really, I think, an advancement that our profession could be proud of, is taking advantage of.
Certainly, and it goes to the whole wellness concept that you mentioned earlier. So let's talk a little bit about dealing with judges. Your husband, Tom, has also been a distinguished jurist, and you've been on the bench for a long time. I remember when you were on the Cuyahoga County Municipal Court, and I was called for jury duty in your court. And I surprisingly, I was picked. I thought nobody's going to want me on this jury, but they did, and then the case settled. And we sat around for about 2 or 3 hours before it was settled. And I'll never forget, you came into the jury room and you spent a substantial amount of time with all the jurors. You thanked us for our service. You talked about citizenship and what it means. I see you've got a flag behind you and the seal of the state. I mean, you really embedded, it was a civics lesson, if you will, on your duty on serving on the jury and how much you appreciated that. There have been certain judges like you, Judge Sam Bell, and others, Judge Mary Casiopo, but they really stand out, and they just bring the profession so far ahead. And then, unfortunately, we sometimes deal with judges who are difficult, maybe like that professor who made Judge stand up, and just they have a sometimes inappropriate behavior. I'll just say it that way. So can you share any thoughts in terms of do's and don'ts when dealing with judges, and maybe even though you're not a difficult judge, but if you are dealing with a difficult judge, how do we maintain our composure and do it professionally and respond?
Yeah, boy, those are difficult questions, and you know, I can remember you know, appearing before a judge that it took everything I could to get to my car before I broke down in tears, because I felt that, you know, I had been harassed. I felt that I hadn't, that I just didn't feel that it was appropriate the way I was treated. And I don't necessarily believe it was because I was a woman. I think he treated all lawyers that way. So, you know, certainly I recognize that it can be very difficult and the expectations can be difficult. I can say too that if there's one thing I've learned through my 20 plus years on the juvenile court bench and 5 years in Cuyahoga Falls, is that it's difficult to be the decision maker. And, you know, I think most judges recognize the importance of the decisions that they have to make every day. But be that as it may, it doesn't excuse a judge from engaging in behavior that's unprofessional, that's demeaning to clients or demeaning to the profession. Fortunately or unfortunately, there are vehicles in place to help deal with that. There are, as a matter of fact, I was on a committee meeting yesterday. The Ohio Judicial Conference does have a professionalism and ethics committee that is part of that, that tries to think of ways that, you know, we can help judges recognize their shortcomings or their inappropriate behavior. For example, if someone would contact the Ohio Judicial Conference or the Ohio Lawyers Assistance Project and indicate that they have a issue with a judge that doesn't rise to the level of a formal complaint, but is certainly concerning, I know that those organizations will try to find other judges that will perhaps know that judge well enough to say, hey, you know, you did this, and you know, you might want to think about maybe doing things a different way, which is a difficult thing for a judge to do too. But you know, from judge to judge is probably a little bit easier way to handle that situation than a lawyer, unless it's one that knows someone pretty well from doing that. I will tell you that early on in my career, I did ask lawyers who I knew pretty well that practiced quite a bit in my court. I would pull them aside and say, hey, what could I be doing better? You know, after they tried a case in my court, was there something that I did that maybe wasn't what it should have been? And I got a lot of really helpful feedback from that. So I think, you know, there's part of that requires some vulnerability. I think if a lawyer suspects that inappropriate behavior rises to the level of a disciplinary complaint, then I think that's unfortunately something that lawyers need to do. But I certainly suspect that most of the people on the call, or most people that practice law, perhaps have a judge that they would feel comfortable going to and explaining what's going on and asking for some assistance. Hopefully I didn't open myself up for a bunch of calls to go to my colleagues. But, you know, I think that, you know, doing those kind of things informally and educating is really, really important. And you know, we judges are human too. Sometimes we say things that, you know, I get off the bench and I say, gosh, why did I say that way? That didn't come out the way I wanted to. You know, and I think that, you know, knowing your judge and knowing whether it's someone that you could approach, that you can say, hey, you know, maybe this could have been handled differently. You know, something to think about, because we all want to do the best job we possibly can as well. I think we'd all rather hear about it from a lawyer that we respect and know than, you know, find out about it in another way.
Thanks,
So.
Judge. With respect to the lawyers who appear before you, and you, like you said, you get to know them if they appear before you a lot. Do you notice any gender-based differences between the representation, particularly in juvenile court? You know, do you face any, like, let's say, inappropriate behavior? Maybe because, you know, a male lawyer, you know, doesn't. Maybe he's speaking in a way that's inappropriate, whereas a female lawyer might not do that. Do you notice any gender differences in the representation, or is it really just person by person?
You know, I'm in a court that it's sort of different to say that, because I am in a court where most of the folks that are here have chosen to practice in this field and, you know, care about children and families. I think what I've noticed is that that people bring their personalities to the job that they do. And I think you know, some of the female lawyers, particularly when they're representing children, tend to have a very motherly touch with them during the course of the representation. But in juvenile court, that's okay. You know, it really is okay. I think that you know, the lawyers of all genders that are here recognize the importance of the work that we do, and recognize that it's a future of a child or a family that's on the line with the work that they do. If I would notice something like that, I don't think I would be shy about pulling the lawyer aside. I think that's important because, again, lawyers are human too, and they may say something that they don't even recognize as being inappropriate or wrong. And, you know, and I've taken the opportunity to do that, you know, by way of education, you know, to try to be helpful, because certainly we need more lawyers that practice in this court and are willing to take on those difficult representations of families in crisis. Yeah, I think that the female lawyers that we have here do an amazing job and bring their past experiences with them. But I think that the men do the same. And when you're dealing with families, I think it's important that the parents that come to the court have strong role models. So the lawyers not only advocate for them, but they can also be an ear for them and a response to them. And they are truly counselors of law, you know, helping them navigate some very difficult situations. So, you know, like I say, I was raised not to see gender bias because my mother always told me I could do whatever I want. And you know, I have a tendency, I guess, to see things in the best light, but I haven't seen anyone demeaned or treated differently in my court based on their gender. You know, I think that the one thing that I would say that is important to be sensitive to is the comfort of the client. So many times if I have a young woman, for example, who has been a victim of human trafficking, by a male member of her family, perhaps I'm going to assign her a female attorney because that might be a more comfortable situation for her. The other side of the coin of that is if I assign a male attorney to her, she'll learn that, you know, all men are not all men are in things for themselves, that there are men that can be positive supports without looking for something in return. So I think, you know, that there are reasons that you might want an attorney of one gender or another with a particular client based on the needs that you see them having. And knowing the personalities of the lawyers and their ability to relate to a particular client become very important for me, particularly when I'm assigning attorneys or guardian ad litem for children, if that makes any sense.
No, that's really helpful, because I thought there would be some differences, particularly in juvenile court or family relations matter, domestic matters. But really, it transcends into all of our practices. If we have a female client or if we have a male client, and to be able to appreciate different perspectives. I just have a couple more questions to finish up here. But before I do, I wanted to ask Daphne if she had any, or if there were any others in the chat that she wanted to raise at this time.
No, Bob, keep going. You're on a roll.
Okay.
Well,
this one, judges.
Can I share one more thought
Sure.
that I think is really, really important?
Please do.
As part of our celebration here at the court of Black History Month and Women's History Month, each year we put up a banner recognizing someone from Summit County that's had a great impact on history. And we were fortunate enough last week to honor retiring Chief Justice O'Connor and put a banner up in our hallway recognizing all the many contributions that she's made both statewide and nationally. And she said something that is much wiser than anything that I have to share, that I would like to share. And she, you know, because I was talking about the importance of women lawyers setting good examples for other women. But something that she said that I think is so very important is putting strong women in a position of law, or as a judge or a lead attorney or a partner, is important not only for young women that will follow, but also important for young men, so that they also recognize all the contributions that women have to make, and that piece of equality. So, you know, as we as women set that example for other women, but also set it for men, so that they appreciate And she was speaking particularly of young men that might come through my court system, of the importance of women in the law, in the profession, in the world, and leadership roles. So I thought that was something that was very astute and not surprisingly came from retired Chief Justice O'Connor.
Thanks for sharing that. I think that's a great point. And I remember when retired Chief Justice O'Connor was a magistrate in Summit County. And what a great trailblazer she's been, like you, in the profession, and the examples that both of you have set. Just two questions. One, just sort of a curious question out of left field. So you've retained your maiden name, Judge Tucci Teodosio, and you've mentioned, you were just Linda Tucci in law school. Just curious, the personal decision to do that, to be known as Judge Linda Tucci Teodosio, and why that was important to you.
My family has always meant the world to me and has been so supportive of me. I was very, very close with my grandmother, and funny story. She always wanted me to get married. When I went to law school, she gave up. She figured, that day is done. And she passed away before I got married. But funny story, some of her old friends came to my wedding, and they were so very excited that I married a lawyer. And I looked at them, I said, I am a lawyer. And they said, that's not what's important. What's important is that you married a lawyer. So, we have come a long way. But, I take a lot of pride in what my family has given to me. And I wanted to recognize where I came from, and always remember how hard my family worked to get me where I am. Without their love and support, I wouldn't be where I am. And so keeping my name as Linda Tucci Teodosio was a way of recognizing and always reminding myself of everything that they gave up so that I could be here today.
Well, that's beautiful. I know another Italian woman who did the same thing, my wife. And when she decided to do that, I was like, what? My name's not good enough for you, right? Everybody else does this. And I was a little, I had to deal with that, right? But it was, once I understood, the reason, which was very similar to what you just said, and her love for her family and the tradition and all the hard work and sacrifice that people made, I think that's a beautiful story. And so, I was just curious about that. I'd never asked you that. And then the last question I wanted to ask, because we just got a few minutes left, and then I certainly would like to give you the last word on any topics we didn't cover that you feel like you'd like to make in any closing remarks. But I alluded to this earlier, in a way. You mentioned earlier that you're 66, so you're very open about your age. Some women, right, are not, but you're like the Energizer Bunny. I mean, how do you get your energy, your work-life balance? We've talked about this, about the stress of being in the law, and sometimes it can be very adversarial. So could you share with the participants, kind of what you do, just in a very practical way?
So a little bit about what I do to try to maintain balance and energy and
Yeah, I just sort of,
sanity.
exactly, like, your routine and how you go about your day.
Sure. One thing that I discovered many, many years ago was the importance of physical exercise. And I guess for me, that's what it is. I started running. As probably most people know, my husband and I lost our daughter in 2011. And I had just started running at that time. And I remember saying, I'm going to keep running until I feel better. Well, several marathons later, I'm still running. But I think that for me, that physical activity gives me energy. Number one, it helps me clear my head. Number two, number three, it serves my mental health more than my physical health, if that makes any sense at all. So, one of the things that I always think about with wellness is finding whatever it is that gives you that center. If I could sing, I would sing. If I were artistic, I would draw. I enjoy hiking. I enjoy spending time with the grandchildren and trying to forget the other problems of the world for a while. So, and I think if you have those things, it brings you back to the work and the profession that you do with a clearer head, and it makes you more able to do your work. I think sometimes we push ourselves so hard that we don't even recognize our own mental exhaustion. And it is hard work that we do. I told the leadership background class the other day, making these decisions is the toughest thing that a judge has to do, representing a client and knowing that your words may make a difference in somebody else's life, or your brief may make a difference in somebody else's life. Those are huge burdens that we carry. And I think finding a release that helps us kind of renew can bring us back to our jobs with either more energy and better abilities. And it's not a matter of, taking the time, it's the matter of making the time, because I think it makes us better as people and better as lawyers. And I'm a firm believer of that. And like I say, a lot of times it's do as I say and not as I do, because sometimes I do get so crammed that I don't make the time that I should. But I think it's very, very important. And I think it really contributes to positive energy. And the other thing is, I'm a firm believer of looking at every opportunity, as to what will this opportunity do for me? What will it do for my family? What do I have to contribute? And, sometimes that leads to learning to say the word no, which I'm not real good at. But I think that, exploring opportunities to expand as a person, into not, helping volunteer with agencies who very often need our expertise as lawyers is also a way of keeping energy and staying involved. And finding purpose in life, because I think that's really what it's all about. We all became lawyers because we had a purpose of wanting to help in one way or another. And so finding ways to explore that and see how we can further our purpose, I think is really important.
Well, thank you for not saying no to us when we asked you to
Oh, it's my
participate
pleasure.
today. I'm
My
going to turn it over to Daphne in a minute just to close things up, but I appreciate your mentioning your beautiful daughter, Andrea Rose, and for creating the Andrea Rose Foundation, which your son Chris now heads up. And that had a profound impact on our community. And we're still with you in our hearts. And she was a beautiful young woman. So we really remember her fondly.
Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome. Daphne, that's it for today. I think we're up against the clock.
We are up against the clock. Judge Teodosio, we're so thankful for the time you spent with us. And we know your time is precious. I'm happy to report that now I've actually met you. You lived up to the expectations of all the really wonderful things that I've heard about you. And most importantly, I think your comments have been insightful and genuine. And, I heard from you a lot of the things that I feel and that I hear my female colleagues feel. And so it's validating to hear your experience, and also really educational and helpful to hear how your experiences have allowed you to come as far as you have. And I picked up a few tips that I'll be using going forward, and I'll be happy to share with young female lawyers, also my contemporaries who are not as young. Just really appreciate your time and insights. And Bob, you did a fabulous job facilitating, and I'm really grateful for our time today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's truly an honor. I have the utmost respect for your law firm and all the work that you do. So for me, it was really an honor to be invited, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share some time with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
That concludes our time today. If you have any follow-up questions that you are too shy to ask the judge, feel free to send them to Bob or me, and we will pass them along. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.